Okay, folks, that's the top of the hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you're just joining, this message isn't really for you because for people who will be joining in 5 minutes, I'll put it in chat again. There will be a recording of this meeting shared. But yeah, we got a lot to get through and we want to be able to take your questions. So let's go ahead and roll right into it. This is how to test and monitor React and Next.js apps with Playwright. And if I get the answer in chat, have you ever written a Playwright test? That'll just help us level set for this presentation. Do throughout, feel free to drop questions in chat. We will answer them when we get to a paragraph stop in our presentation. We won't quite break in like Twitch style, but we will get to it. But let's introduce ourselves. I'm Noshanika Malafera. You may know me from my work with the CNCF, my work with OpenTelemetry. I'm developer relations at Czechly, and with me is Stefan.
Hey everyone, I'm Stefan. I'm with Czechly now for I think three years. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. Just wrapping up my day, and I have a strong background in front-end engineering, automation, and now for 3 years, I'm very hammering on all this Playwright, Microsoft end-to-end testing and monitoring stuff, and
Oh,
I'm pretty much in love with it, which is
thank
cool.
you so much, Amanda, for answering that you have used written a Playwright test. If you have and you've needed help and you ever watch video, then hopefully you know Stefan's face well because Stefan is the person really out there doing super up to date and super in depth video guides to all the subtle Playwright features that we really need in production. But hey, Stefan, I'm gonna let you take it away because we got up to 25 people now in the chat. I guess Amanda agrees. These Stefan's videos super useful.
Oh, thank
um,
you for watching.
yeah,
It's always
I've
shouting into the void.
I've hit show transcript, this week to get unstuck on something. To it's like what's the best way to do that, right? So yeah, fantastic. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. We'll definitely have time for questions, but yeah, we got plenty of people here, so let's go ahead and dive in.
For sure. Let's talk about testing and testing React applications. So in the next 40 minutes, we will cover how to test with Playwright. So we will give a little bit of an introduction. We won't go into go into the nitty-gritty details because we want to, also we will cover it, but we also want to cover how you can start monitoring your applications. So we kind of divided this whole session here into two parts. And we will monitor and test this beauty here. What you see here is PWT Workshop, which is a Next.js application that I have deployed to Vercel. It includes all the good stuff. So it comes with add to cart, it comes with shopping functionality. You can have a search, a login, all the good stuff is there. And I usually use this for workshops, for videos every now and then. And the general question is, how do you test this application, right? Because there's a lot of things going on in the client side. So testing a JavaScript or a React application is very, very complicated because you cannot just curl away and check for a status code, right? And when you talk to people, very often there's the question, okay, what test should you actually write? And a lot of people kind of dive into the holy testing pyramid, right? On the bottom, we have unit and component tests. These are very easy to write. They are fast to run. And then these are really very much, let me just take a sip. So they are very fast to run and cheap to run. And usually you combine a lot of component or unit tests into an integration test, which then covers more things. And then on top of that, you have end-to-end tests with, for example, with Playwright. And these then run in a real browser so that you can cover third-party APIs or test third-party APIs and see if everything's working. And in the React ecosystem, this is usually done with two projects. So we have the React testing library, which mimics and simulates a DOM environment, which is so that you can run all your things very, very quickly and very fast. And then you have Playwright end-to-end testing, which spins up a real browser so that you can test the entire application.
Yeah,
If
and
you
I
haven't
think,
used,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry, delay, but there, really basically, right? Very often you have these conversations. Oh, I want to test this way. It's like, oh, we can do this on another layer of that pyramid. One of the ideas of the pyramid is just all the layers are needed, right? That there are going to be some things that we really want to test with, like the React testing library. There are other things that we're only really going to be able to test with end to end.
Yeah, especially when you have a complex application, right? In React, very often it's kind of consisting out of multiple building blocks, multiple APIs. Kind of if you really want to be sure that everything is working, end-to-end is pretty much the thing that you want to do to be sure that you're on the safe side. If you haven't used Playwright so far, well, Playwright is a pretty big deal. It appeared, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and it is written on the website. Playwright enables reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps. And well, this project kind of entered the market and took it. So these days, Playwright has 73,000 GitHub stars. I'm not the biggest fan of this sanity metric, but it definitely means something. And it reached 9 million weekly downloads. That is a whole lot of Playwright code being downloaded every week. And now after I started, or I learned about Playwright, I'm pretty sure, and I guess a lot of people agree with me, that Playwright has become the standard for end-to-end testing and for QA and front-end teams. And the question here is why? Because we had good solutions for end-to-end testing out there, right? One of the big advantages is that, well, it's backed by Microsoft and it's very actively maintained. So there's a new Playwright version coming out every 6-ish weeks. And if you interacted with the teams or the issues or the pull requests, there's a whole lot of going on. The team is super active. You can get responses very quickly. And if you have feature requests, and you know a few people from the player team, they usually have a response time of 24 hours. So even though there's written 700 issues and 23 pull requests, that looks very busy, but this is very a priority of the player team to kind of engage with the community and kind of push the project forward. And then when I got it started using Playwright, well, I was completely blown away by how quickly you can write your first Playwright script. So what you see here is the Playwright code gen command, which allows you to, well, generate some code. So this will spin up a browser window, which then runs in recording mode. And this allows you then to kind of tag along, click some buttons, fill out some forms, add some assertions, and everything will make it in your Playwright or into a generated Playwright end-to-end testing script, which I think is just super neat. So you see there that I'm here kind of clicking around in the demo. I'm changing the quantity of this item. I'm checking the card. I'm adding an assertion even with this little toolbar that is running in this recording mode there. And everything is recorded on the right side so that I then can take this generated Playwright script and I can run it. And this gives me a super nice head start because this is following the Playwright best practices and gives me kind of a way to just copy and paste it and run it and have some first automation going, which I think is pretty nice.
Yeah, I think, before we dive into the best practices code here, which is fantastic with code gen, it also shows as we're capturing it, like, why do we have it in testing, right? When we look at this storefront, we know that component testing is not going to get it all, right? We know that we're relying on these services. We may be relying on payment providers, but certainly other third-party services. And we're trying to sell a snowboard for thousands of euro, right? So we care, right? It doesn't matter. Oh, don't worry, all my code was valid because my component, of course, that matters during the dev process that our code is valid and it renders. But we really care. Will a user actually be able to add stuff to the cart and check out? If any part of that is not working, we want to know about it. So absolutely, it sort of shows the two reasons that we really need to do end-to-end testing, even though it is, of course, slower, more expensive than our super fast component testing.
Yeah, 100%. I usually tend to use component testing. Doesn't matter if it's Playwright's component testing. So theoretically, you can run component testing in Playwright, but it didn't get much love over the last year. So I would usually go for the React testing library or the simulated approach. But I usually use these component tests for checking rendering logic to see if my if-else conditions. And in the example that we've just seen there are probably 10 components at play, right? There was an add to cart button that talked to a store somewhere that updated the cart. So there's just a lot of things going on, a lot of requests flying, and end-to-end and real browsers are the only way to be certain that all this browser functionality actually works. So that I think is a very good call. When we now look at the screen, what we see here is the generated script that we just had in the recording. And this already shows some of the things that the Playwright team or the Playwright library wants us to do. First of all, it wants us to use user-first locators. You see there a lot of get by role calls, which are accessibility first. So we always, when you test your things with Playwright, with React application, or really any other application, you want to put on your user first hat. So what can you see? What can you read? What can assistive technology see? This is how you want to test usually first. And then you see also every now and then it becomes a little bit tricky. So usually in these cases, you will reach for a test ID so that you can just kind of grab things easier and not kind of wrangle the DOM or the interface too much. One thing to consider here, though, is that Playwright tests look very synchronous, but there's actually a lot of magic going on. And this is what I love about this framework so much, because when we look at these calls here, you might, when you start looking or using Playwright scripts, you see here that there's a get by role call. All right, this kind of tries to locate an element, and then there's a click, and that's it. But notice that there is an await in front of it. And basically what you can do in Playwright is that all the actions, let it be click, hover, fill, whatever you want to do with your UI, Playwright will do a whole lot of actionability steps, what's called, before it's actually doing what you want to do. So when you call click, Playwright will actually auto-wait for this element to be there, to be visible, to not be obscured, to not be animated. So you don't have to worry if this element is currently present or not. I see a lot of people making the mistake to check, hey, is this visible before they click an element? You don't have to do that because Playwright will figure that out for you. And the same applies to assertions. So here we have a to contain text assertion. It could also be a to be visible, to be something. These are called web first assertions in Playwright, and these are also asynchronous. So what you're saying here is that I have this element that has the ID card total, and we want to have it the text 1259, but we don't want to have it this text right now, but eventually. We're just defining the UI state that we expect eventually. So with these two auto-waiting mechanisms, you can go ahead, let it be React or another application, but you can define your actions and your expected UI state, and then you can really call it a day, regardless of the technology you're using. If you're not following this pattern, usually there is something off. And this makes it just very, very straightforward. And this is also why CodeGen is working so well, because we don't care about the internals. Of course, we could now listen for network requests or some classes to appear, disappear, or attributes to change. But do users care about AJAX requests, fetch requests, or classes? I doubt it.
Yeah, Playwright continues to impress me. I was just writing something today on drag and drop, and it still
that is
got
tough,
me
though.
that it was like, oh, the basic version of drag and drop in Playwright is one line, right? Like, hey, drag to this element. It's like, oh wow, I still recall doing that like pixel by pixel in another, and then trying to control the browser size and all these things to try and get it to work consistently. So yeah, I'm still hard, right? Really complex UIs are always going to be a little tough. But yeah, very, very impressive elegance and very user-centric language in Playwright. They don't care that the button has a certain class. They care that it's active. They care that it's visible, etc.
You can still reach for the internals, but there's a very, very clear stance there. Go user first, because this is what you want to test when you're on the end-to-end level anyways, right? You're on the top of the testing pyramid. You want to put on your user hat. So why are you testing classes? Maybe you shouldn't. And maybe you should check if something is visible or not. So, and this is kind of true regardless of the technology. So let it be React or any other thing. Speaking of React, though, especially with server-side rendered first React apps like Next, I have a lot of discussions around these kind of things where people kind of server render their React applications and then they use Playwright, and Playwright is then too fast. And every now and then tests are failing. And let me just tell you a secret, Playwright usually is not too fast. And if you have an example where Playwright is too fast, let me know about it, because I still have to discover one. Because what actually is happening in a lot of server-side rendered React applications is this. So when you server-side render your React application, you send down some from JSX generated rendered index HTML, right? Could be Next.js, could be whatever, literally. The browser then tries to render something on the screen as quickly as possible. This is usually happening when the styles and this CSS is parsed. And then one script, more script. The Next.js application is usually very complicated, so there are gazillion scripts flying. But at some point, your application will be ready. And you see here now, there's a gap. There's a gap between first paint and ready. Paints includes also the buttons, the input elements. They're all there, but they're just not doing anything. Because the JavaScript, to make it work, is very often not loaded yet. So it kind of looks like it's functional, but it is not. And this is not actually Playwright being too fast, but I'm a strong believer that you have to recognize, well, you have a time gap in your application. Doesn't matter what you call it, but your app doesn't work. Because when Playwright clicks this button very quickly, it will just try and try. Hey, is this button now visible? Is it there? Can I click it? Is it enabled? Click it, click it, click it. And it will try it. And when it clicks it and nothing's happening, well, then maybe Playwright is not too fast, but your app is broken in certain scenarios. And you might now say, yeah, but Stefan, but it's only for 100 milliseconds or something, isn't it? And this argument, if we want to have that here on screen right now, is pretty much the it works on my machine argument. Because if you're loading a JavaScript heavy, a React application, and it loads, everything's loaded in 100 milliseconds, it could be 350 for someone else, or it could be literally seconds for someone to kind of click this button and see something happening. And when you kind of on the highway in the public transport and you click something and you wonder if something happens, we all know that because occasionally we experience it. No matter the fancy phone, good connection we have, sometimes we have poor connections. So in these scenarios, it's kind of up to you to decide if this is a problem or not. But if you run into edge cases where Playwright is too fast, you have to recognize that some of your users will be too fast too in some situations.
Yeah, there's if you're not following the chat, first of all, great work focusing on a single thing in a webinar. We appreciate that. But we are sharing some links to sort of more reading on this. Stefan's short on just this issue with Playwright is a really good explication. Also, some other article links, so check it out.
Yeah, that said, every now and then your tests will fail though. So what you see here is a Playwright test report. And this is really the one feature that then got me hooked into the Playwright ecosystem because I had a long-lasting experience with end-to-end automation and testing frameworks. And what you see here is a Playwright trace. So whenever you run your Playwright test, you get a trace file that really includes all the information that you need to kind of figure out what happens. So you have screenshots, you have DOM snapshots, you can walk around all the steps that you have taken. Everything is there at your fingertips when your tests are failing in CI/CD. And very often, these trace files or inspecting these trace files leads to discovery of something that you will never see on your local machine because Playwright is just too fast, right? But it's also very good at kind of unveiling these situations when there are gaps, when there are issues in the application, and trace files are really the next level for me.
Yeah, this is just want to echo this. Playwright does capture video. If you become a Czechly user, when things fail, you'll get a video of here was our attempt to go through this test. Very useful. Often what I'll do first, right? It's like, oh, well, just show me, is it really obvious visually what went wrong? I had a person at our last webinar say, well, can I slow the video down by default? Can I make it run very slow? It's like, you're thinking of the trace. The trace is frame by frame, right? The trace is every single content paint. And I love this browser at the left, or this panel at the left with actions, where it's like, hey, when I was trying to execute this line of your test, here's what I was seeing. And that is so helpful for breaking down these subtle timing things. We're not usually in the state of like, oh, Playwright's too fast and that's why it's breaking. That's not the most common failure mode, but being able to look line by line really does help.
Yeah. I mean, also when we talk about Playwright is too fast, sometimes it might be like a burden, but that is also a feature, right? Because you want your Playwright test or your end-to-end test as quickly as possible, right? I know you talk a lot about hard-coded timeouts or something. You don't want to wait 3 seconds. You want to move forward in your tests as quickly as possible. That's just the deal with end-to-end testing. This is what you want to do to have a good result quickly.
Yeah, I never shut up about it because we sort of reference it briefly here, but when I go to like look at a user's like, oh, this is not working, I don't know why. Every time, every time where it's like it is really tough to debug, it's like, oh, we ended up putting in all these 5-second waits just all over the place.
Yeah, because you never know. Will it be 5 seconds? Will it be 2? Will it be 10? So you should really handle or hand all these timeout things over to Playwright and let it figure out the rest. It's very good at that. But consider these key facts. You might now say, all right, let's put our end-to-end tests into a CICD pipeline. So what you see here is the CICD pipeline that I maintain for a project that is also a remix application this time. So what we do there is we run ESLint, then we run TypeScript, then we run vtest to run React testing library and the simulated DOM. Then we deploy it. And then after we have a preview URL, we show or we send over the robots to run Playwright there and check if everything works together with the connected APIs and stuff. And you might now say, all right, that's great, right? You have a green light, everything is looking good, you feel good. I mean, I'm usually on both sides. I'm on the QA automation side, but also on the feature development side. So let's deploy to prod, right? But now since I'm with Czechly and maybe even earlier, I'm like, yeah, is preview testing really the entire thing? I mean, if I test my features when I deploy to prod, is that everything? And I'm a very anxious person. So I'm constantly checking after a production deploy. It's like, does it still work? I mean, that is not rational like at all, but I'm not paid to deploy to preview and have a green check mark. I'm paid to deploy to prod.
Yeah. Yeah, and how many of us now that you'll have like geo-specific failures, all the time, have us not only check, but then we open the VPN. We're like, okay, I gotta go hit one other. Our biggest, all of our customers are in Germany, all of our customers are in Singapore. Oh, I gotta go VPN to there and just check there.
Yeah.
Maybe check a third VPN. You start to be, boy, you're doing a lot because you've had user reported failures. You've had failures where everything was green until you do something like watching real user monitoring, looking for user frustration to know they got a problem, and then waiting for an email from your users, which is obviously not the ideal way to be finding problems.
Yeah, and it's not only infrastructure, right? Because also a lot of times when you deploy to prod, there is Google Tag Manager in there, and you load 25 different scripts. There are kind of how many parties are running in your production website. I've been taken down by a third party, not only once. I kid you not. So knowing that prod works is is a good thing, especially when you have a very front-end heavy application where things can. I mean, JavaScript is unforgiving. JavaScript just blows up. And especially for Next.js applications, there's kind of the death of Next.js. When something kind of breaks up or breaks in the hydration process, the page just dies. And you might have seen it. I've definitely seen it plenty of times. So this is just the curse of the architecture. So the question here now is, what if you could be safe and use these tests that you use for your preview deployments also for production monitoring? And that might now sound like a wild idea, but let's play that through. And again, I'm just an anxious person. I like to be sure. And I like green check marks and green lights. So when you usually run your Playwright tests in CICD, they are running in a single location, whatever you have configured, right? Somewhere in GitHub Actions, somewhere in whatever you use. And well, you could also take the same code base and run it distributed from the entire planet. That already gives you a little bit more confidence that it's not only working from Frankfurt, Germany, which would be my closest data center, but that it's also working from the United States, Australia, whatever. If you're shipping globally, this is kind of a thing, right? To know that it works globally. But then you could also start kind of running your Playwright tests on a schedule, and you could stop using your support team as your monitoring system, but rather know by yourself that, hey, 5 minutes ago, login worked, add to cart worked. All these kind of things were checked actively by a real browser from a certain location. I'm confident that there's no major outage because I have a green dashboard. And if you don't have the green dashboard, well, you will be the first one to know that something is off somewhere. Nika already mentioned that is very often it's like deploying to prod, hoping for the best, and then waiting for a Slack channel to kind of, hey, Stefan, something is off. Can you check? I mean, I want to be the person that shows up, hey, I know something is off. I'm working on it. And that is just a super nice thing for customers too, right? If I hit the support channel, I don't hit the support channel very often, but if I do and I get the response, here's the ticket, here's the updated status page, you can expect an ETA fix here in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, cool, I see you have everything under control. This builds confidence. And I just enjoy that when I see that happening. And as a shipping person, I just like to be on the active side. Well, and you might have guessed it. That's what we do here at Czechly. So at Czechly, we build products to detect community and resolve issues, which is what we will show you now. And this is how Czechly works. So Czechly allows you to take your existing Playwright code base and kind of put it into the Czechly cloud run it distributed from around the world, and run it on a schedule. And kind of configure your alerts or configure alerts so that you are the first one to know when something is off. Then you can create dashboards and all the good stuff. But we will show you what that all means in just a little bit. And let's dive in. What do you think, Nika?
I think it's demo time. Yeah, let's make some tests.
You think it's demo time. So what we have here is my VS Code, and this is the code base. It's a Next.js code base that we have seen here earlier. So this is the demo page again, right? So it's the PWT workshop store. We can add to cart, we can navigate around, we can log in. All the good stuff is kind of included here. And the project itself also is already a setup Playwright project. So we have here a Playwright config. If you have Playwright experience, you probably have seen that one. So you can define the parallelism there, how many workers, if you want to use trace files, what browsers, projects, all the stuff is usually defined in the Playwright config. And then you have a testing directory, which is here at tests. And here we have a few spec files, that is, if add to cart works, if login works, if products works. So this is a pretty standard Playwright test case or Playwright project. So we can now go in here and we can say, hey, what tests do we have? So we can call test lists. And these are the test cases that are currently defined here in the Playwright project. So let's just see if this works. So we can now run these. And they are running here from my local machine against the thing that I have deployed on the cloud, right? So this would usually be your run in CICD. I could also now point it to localhost if I wanted to. But yeah, right now we're kind of simulating that we're in CICD. And then if we are done, we have here the Playwright test report that I also showed you very briefly. So we have it going on here. Now we can go into the browser and check it again. So we now have a passing test suite locally running from my machine, running against this site here. But let me show you a magic trick. I can now also go into the command line here, and I could say npx Czechly tests. And what's now happening is that the Czechly CLI, which I will tell you about in just a moment, now picks up all the Playwright tests that are included in the project, and it's running them in the Czechly cloud. So this is not running on my machine anymore. So this is now running on someone else's computer, saying the Czechly cloud. And I think this is already pretty cool, because when I want to configure Playwright in CI/CD, you have to figure out what do you do with the artifacts, what do you do with the alerting, how do you configure this massive YAML block that you want to have in GitHub Actions or GitLab. This all kind of is just abstracted away in a single command saying Czechly test. And why does that work? Well, you can, if you have an existing Playwright project, what you can do is you can call npm create Czechly. And this then will parse your project if you want to set it up, and will kind of create all the files, all the needed stuff for you. And this is already what I did. So let me show you what this command will do. So first of all, you need a new dependency, which is the Czechly CLI. So it's normal npm stuff. I installed the latest one. And then you need a Czechly config at the core, at the root of the project. So what you see here is a very similar pattern. So we have defined config, we have to give our project a name, an ID, a repository, and Czechly is all about checks. So we have API checks, multi-step API checks, we have browser checks, TCP checks. So there are a ton of active options where you can start monitoring and testing your current production environment. And then we have the idea of constructs, so you can define all the resources for your monitoring setup in something that we call constructs. So for example, you see here that I can define everything I want in the Czechly infrastructure, in the Czechly cloud, in TypeScript, and I can just initialize these things, which I think is super sweet. So you can configure all your monitoring setup, your testing setup, your alerting setup from TypeScript files, which I'm super into. And if you just want to get started and kind of pick your Playwright stuff, you can define, hey, I just want to match all these files here and just run them for me. And that is what we actually did here with running Czechly tests. But let me show you another magic trick. Usually what you want to do is in CI/CD is you want to run your tests, but you also want to keep all the artifacts. And you can do that with the --record argument. So this is now running again the Playwright tests that previously were running from my own machine, now in the Czechly cloud. And when we now go to Czechly, so here we have a Czechly account. This is an overview that shows all the monitoring going on. But when we now go to test sessions, we see here that our PWT webinar test session is running here right now. And when we go in here, we see that, well, one spec file is still running, but this is just a single command and it just works. So you can reuse everything that you already have in CI/CD with the -- record flag. So when we now go in here, we see a whole lot of statistics, but most likely this will look familiar to you, right? So we have here page go to, get by. This looks pretty much like the Playwright test report that we have had a look up earlier, but we also automatically persist these kind of things for you. So here we have the session of this login test very quickly. That is a video that is just there. I can check that out. And again, if you, which you should use traces instead of videos in most of the cases. Here we have the trace file for this particular test case so that you can kind of go after it and debug what is going on. So when you use this command in your CI/CD flow, you usually just get this link, paste it back into your pull request overview, and everything will then just there for you. And yeah, I think this is already pretty sweet. But this is then the case only for you to run Playwright when you want to push a new or merge a new feature to main, right? The real magic happens when we go back into the terminal and we decide we develop a new feature. We now have new end-to-end tests that are ready to push forward. And we now want to use these spec files here as end-to-end production monitors, as synthetic monitors. So what we now can do is we can go in here and we can say npx Czechly deploy preview to see what's going on. And this now again is parsing our project. Here's also an API monitor. So for the people maintaining APIs, right? API health is a huge deal. Here we have now an API check, which came from the file that I had earlier, and a few browser checks. And if I now want to push these to be running as monitors, I can just call npx Czechly deploy. And now check this out. This is one of my most favorite features here. It's now asking me if I want to deploy. And check this out, and done. It takes not even 2 seconds. And when we now go back into our Czechly dashboard here, we see that there are now a few more monitors going on. And these are now running every 10 minutes. This was defined in my Czechly config. You can have shorter, longer intervals, whatever you need. But these are now headless Chromes running on a schedule from multiple locations to tell me that everything is all right. So then we can go in here and we can dive into a lot of stats. So these are now new monitors, so there's not a lot of things going on. We can check here at this one. So we can have a look at stats, timings, the different locations. So we have here in Northern California, North Virginia. I think these one will run in Ireland and in a different one. But the key here is that if something is off, you will get to know about it, get alerted. And if you want to dive deeper of what is happening here, everything is persisted for you. And I will take a break if there are some comments and some questions here.
Yeah, feel free to chime in the chat or in Q&A. We answer a few questions in Q&A, which I just answered in text because they weren't quite in flow. But thank you so much, Nate, for asking a couple of questions. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, chat is quiet, so I think we can roll into some testing best practices.
All right. Yeah, so that is it. So you can then push your things to Czechly monitoring. Get alerted. I know that also Nika is talking about OTEL integrations too, so that when you get an alert, they can really dive into your infrastructure to see what's actually happening. But I really dig this to just reuse what you have, push it to monitoring, and go ahead. I think this is very, very nice. So we're Czechly for end-to-end cases. We really want everybody to also follow suit, put on the user hat, stop monitoring with your support team, but monitor with technology. So usually what you want to do is you want to develop your Playwright tests locally with npx Playwright test against your local host, whatever you're doing. Then once you're feature ready, you want to use npx Czechly test to kind of do preview testing, similarly like you do with Playwright before, but also to validate your monitoring setup, right? You don't want to push monitors to production and then kind of be not sure that they're all green, because alert fatigue is a thing. That you want to push only monitors that are green, and if they're red and if they trigger alerts, it should mean something. So that is very important.
Yeah, as I always say, we're all used to maybe more in, like unit testing than in the end to end, but we always have oh, that test's always broken, right? That's not one you want to hook up to alerts to be emailed in the middle of the night. If it's either quite flaky or always broken, like, hey, maybe that one will stay in our local development or in our integration testing.
100%. Monitoring, especially synthetic or active monitoring, should mean something, right? Because here your system really shows up, wants to check if something is working at a certain moment. Better be sure that this is accurate. And then you take your existing Playwright code base or API monitors or whatever you have defined there. And we define this as monitoring as code, right? Whatever you can do in Czechly, you can also do in source code. You can then control it via your CICD system, via the command line. And then you call npx Czechly deployed just to control your entire monitoring setup. If you have questions about what monitoring as code is, well, there's a long article in our Learn section, which also includes a whole lot of Playwright best practices. So you can go to czechlyhq.com/learn/monitoring as code. And what I'm really dreaming of is that with Playwright as a technology, and we're kind of pairing it with Czechly and monitoring itself, that just because I have a strong front-end background, right, that we as application developers or people in charge of the front end start treating APIs, websites, like people treat APIs. And the thing here is that if you talk to Go, PHP, whatever people use to build APIs, even JavaScript, people are obsessed with the number of nines, right? If you're kind of providing, let it be your internal API or a user customer-facing API, people are obsessed with the number of nines. So how often does this API works, or how often is it broken, more importantly? So people really consider these 99.999% to be a key thing for their API health. There's a fun fact, 99.9, so 99, so 4 nines, are still 50 minutes of downtime, right? Knowing this information, being alerted, being on top of it is crucial. And as an API or front-end developer, I don't want to have these 50 minutes in Black Friday, right? So that can kind of be a big, big deal. And to kind of get this transparency, you just cannot get around it, and you must test your front end all the time, right? Otherwise, you cannot get this confidence or get these numbers. And I'm a strong believer in the front end testing because if you care, you write a test for it, right? And if you care in production, which you should do, then you should start monitoring your features. And that is a big difference, right? If you use Playwright in your CI/CD pipeline, you could probably gain feature confidence, right? You know that your count login works, that add to cart works, whatever you kind of test in, you get the confidence that it works in your preview environment at the moment in time. I personally prefer application confidence, right? Or functionality confidence, so that I can know, hey, my stuff works 99.99% in prod, because I kind of want to be a good engineer and I want to be proud of my work. And that would make me very happy that there are no production bugs. And especially for front-end applications, very often you see that, oh yeah, that broke on the way. We just fix it in the next deploy. Why is it like that? Why can we not just say, hey, the key flows are working at all times? And if they're not, well, I should be the first one to know. Maybe you want to be the first one to know too. So then there's very often the question, okay, but what should we monitor? And that is a very tricky question. I usually go for monitoring the critical paths, right? It's also sometimes monitoring everything in prod is also not possible. But I usually transform these things into monitoring systems that I care about and that I cannot have broken for a longer time. And yeah, this also helps then to avoid monitoring fatigue, right? I have usually a whole lot of end-to-end tests running in the preview circle, and then I have the 20, 25, 30 production monitors that are really sure the key features of the app. These features that the CEO would call me if they're broken, these are in production monitor. The rest maybe not so much, but these are the least cases that I have set up in monitoring. And this then just gives me the idea that, well, prod is all right. And this honestly lets me sleep well at night, because if I know I have a green monitoring dashboard, I know that everything is all right. And this is what we had to cover about Playwright monitoring. For the people that already use Playwright monitoring in Czechly with browser checks, we have something cooking. So we have now Justin Alfer Playwright Test Suites. So if you want to level up and have a look at these, please check them out. And yeah, with that, we reached the end, and I guess we're up for questions.
Awesome. So we had one question come in via chat about using Czechly, the Czechly network or the Czechly monitoring dashboards, which have a private location. Your service is served only on a VPN. So there is a Czechly private location option. I dropped the documentation link in the chat. So do check that out. Yeah, so I think we really see this vision to a very integrated testing approach where we're using our component testing. We may be running Playwright locally for our first kind of sanity checking, and then we're using a network to run really active monitoring on multiple environments, but especially on production. Folks, that has been most of our time, but we do have time for questions if people want to drop them in chat. But otherwise, we will be sharing out a recording and transcript of this session. You get that via email. You can also find it on the Czechly YouTube and share the link to that as well. If you're watching this recorded on YouTube and you were curious all the links we mentioned, go ahead and take a look down. There'll be links shared down below the YouTube video. Great question from Darren. Can we use Playwright tags so the Czechly only picks up certain tags for monitoring? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So tagging and grouping is a really effective piece of saying, hey, these are the things I actually want to deploy, or these are the things that I want to get notified about. Yeah, is all fully supported in Czechly. Yeah, that's a very, very smart thing to do for a more where you have a really complex set of checks that you want to monitor. You can also do like, hey, we're moving this to a separate folder, and those are the ones we want to deploy. There's a ton of ways to implement that. Yeah. So great question, Alessandro. Can you configure the frequency and locations from the Checkly config file on your repo? So you monitoring his code is not a joke for us. So I'll share that monitoring his code guide from here. But you absolutely want to, you do not want to be doing a couple little things in the web UI that are not reflected in your repository, or vice versa. So absolutely, you will define that config within your repository with a very complete config file. So yeah, locations, tags, frequency, and then notifications channels as well. So maybe you'll have a whole group of things that are running that are just like, hey, these images aren't loading as quickly. You say, okay, this is all like no notifications, or just send a Slack notification.
Yeah. The thing here is just to note that, so you have general configuration in the Checkly config, right? If you want to get very granular, you usually wind up doing using the Checkly constructs. So what you see here is that this is now creating an API check, but we could also now, and I'm winging that, so we could now also go in here and we could say, we want to create a new browser check, and then we could set regions, frequencies on everything that we want. And I'm not sure if AI is right about this, so proper, but you can then be very, very granular on what you want to do. And the cool thing about this approach is that we took with the Checkly CLI is that this is actually parse and run when you run Checkly test or Checkly deploy, right? So if you want to kind of set up, I don't know, loops, or you want to read some files and do something fancy, maybe you even want to make a fetch call first and kind of set up certain monitoring scenarios on the API level or at the end-to-end level, you can totally do that because we took a programmatic approach here to kind of configure your testing and monitoring setup rather than going YAML, right? So this is TypeScript, JavaScript. If you want to loop and define it on all levels.
Yeah, especially useful for like, hey, we have maybe some dynamic domain that's coming in. That's like, oh, well, this is for this deploy
Right.
environment. Sort of that's the first time I ran into it, but yeah, really, really nice to have available the construct syntax or
Yeah.
construct model. Yeah, to be
Yeah.
able to say, hey, I want to be very, very specific about this group of checks.
Yeah. 100%.
Nate, thank you for the kind words. We love making videos. Obviously, Stefan loves it a lot more than I do because these are great and makes a ton of them. But we both really enjoy doing it, so we're definitely keeping it up. So yeah, thank you so much for checking that out. I really do recommend, especially keeping up with Stefan's videos on the check the YouTube account. Once a feature is maybe kind of worth using or at least worth considering, usually Stefan's done some coverage of it, so it's fantastic to especially to keep up to date about what people are doing and what their best practices are.
I also
Okay.
like to pick up questions on the YouTube comments or in our Slack community, right? So if you have kind of questions for videos that you would like to see or content that I have a long list, but just add items to the list. I will come to it eventually. So always comment, people.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, every week or so I go in. It's like, oh, well, let me answer whatever comments didn't get picked up by Stefan, and it's like, oh, none. He got it, which is fantastic. All right, folks. Well, I'm gonna wrap it here. Again, we will be sharing this recording. You get it both via email and on the Czechly YouTube page. I don't think I missed the last question. Okay, fantastic, folks. Thank you so much. You will get more invites for more webinar events in the coming weeks and months. And also, if you want to get started with Czechly, do check out the weekly Czechly Kickstart, which is also available at czechlyhq.com/kickstart. Okay, folks, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.